friends. We're reading Little House in the Big Woods, and we're at the bottom of page 195, and we're about to find out how Pa found the honeybee tree. Well, I took a shortcut. Oh, I didn't take my gun, he said, because I wasn't hunting, and now it's summer there, and wasn't much danger of meeting trouble. Panthers and bears are so fat at this time of year, they're lazy and good-natured. Well, I took a shortcut through the woods, and I nearly ran into a big bear. I came around a clump of underbrush, and there he was, not as far from me as across this room. He looked around at me, and I guess he saw I didn't have a gun. Anyway, he didn't pay any more attention to me. He was standing at the foot of a tree, and the bees were buzzing all around him. They couldn't sting him through his thick fur. Can you see the bear reaching into the tree? And they can't sting him through his thick fur, lucky bear. And he kept brushing them away from his head with one paw. I stood there watching him, and he put the other paw into the hole and drew it all out, dripping with honey. He licked the honey off his paw and reached in for more. But by that time I had found me a club. I wanted that honey for myself. So I made a great racket, banging the club against a tree and yelling. The bear was so fat and full of honey that he just dropped on all fours and waddled off among the trees. I chased him some distance and got him going fast away from the bee tree, and then I came back for my wagon. Laura asked him how he got the honey away from the bees. That was easy, Pa said. I left the horses back in the woods where they wouldn't get stung, and then I chopped the tree down and split it open. Didn't the bees sting you? No, said Pa. Bees never sting me. The whole tree was hollow and filled from top to bottom with honey. The bees must have been storing the honey there for years. Some of it was old and dark, but I guess I got enough good clean honey to last us a long time. Laura was sorry for the poor bees. She said they worked so hard, and now they won't have any honey. But Pa said there was lots of honey left for the bees, and there was another large hollow tree nearby into which they could move. He said it was time that they had a clean new home. They would take the old honey he had left in the old tree and make it into fresh new honey and store it in their new house. They would save every drop of the spilled honey and put it away, and they would have plenty of honey again long before winter came. Our next chapter is called Harvest, and that's the season we're in right now. Fall is the harvest season. Let's see what Pa's harvesting. Pa and Uncle Henry traded work. When the grain got ripe in the fields, Uncle Henry came to work with Pa, and Aunt Polly and all the cousins came to spend the day. When Pa went up to help Uncle Henry cut his grain, and then Ma took Laura and Mary and Carrie to spend the day with Aunt Polly. Ma and Aunt Polly worked in the house, and all the cousins played together in the yard till dinner time. Aunt Polly's yard was a fine place to play, because the stumps were so thick. The cousins played jumping from stump to stump without ever touching the ground. Even Laura, who was the littlest, could do this easily in the places where the smallest trees had grown close together. Cousin Charlie was a big boy, going on 11 years old, and he could jump from stump to stump all over the yard. The smaller stumps he could jump 2 at a time, and he could walk on the top rail of the fence without being afraid. Pa and Uncle Henry were out in the field, cutting the oats with cradles. A cradle was a sharp steel blade fastened to a framework of wooden slats that caught and held the stalks of the grain when the blade cut them. Pa and Uncle Henry carried the cradles by their long curved handles and swung the blades into the standing oats. Then when they had cut enough to make a pile, they slid the cut stalks off the slats into neat heaps on the ground. Can you see the neat heaps of oat? So that's where you get your oatmeal from. It actually comes from oat plants, and that's what they're cutting right now. It was hard work walking around the field in the hot sun and with both hands swinging the heavy cradles into the grain and cutting it, and then sliding it into the piles. After the grain was cut, they must go over the field again. This time they would stoop over each pile, taking up a handful of the stalks in each hand, and they would knot them together to make a longer strand. Then, gathering up the pile of grain in their arms, they would bind it tightly around with the band that they had made, and tie the band and tuck in its ends. So now we're going to go ahead and stop, and tomorrow we're going to read more about how they harvest their oats. Good night.